Tēnā koutou katoa. Today's session, I'm joined by Nina Christian, who is an award-winning global brand and marketing expert. She has 3 decades helping business leaders and over 1,000 brands build their audience, authority, and connection. She's also the author of the book Marketing Me, Take Charge of Your Personal Brand and Make Your Mark on the World, which helps professionals market themselves authentically and confidently. She's also a good friend, a fabulous human. She's a hands-on mum of 5 as well. So, for those of you that struggle with the juggle, she knows all about that as well as her marketing expertise. And I am delighted to be chatting with you today. Nina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jess. I'm thrilled to be here as well. I've been waiting for this a long time. You're a great mate. And really excited to be on your show today. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for coming. I think the reason you sprung to mind, not just because I enjoy chatting to you, but the reason you sprung to mind specifically for this show and for the podcast is so often in the leadership space, we talk about our personal brand. We talk about, amplifying our impact. And I think for leaders specifically, there's almost this challenge between the work that we do and the strategies that we're executing, and also being able to sell ourselves or at least articulate our value proposition. And I think this is particularly true for women. We can sometimes struggle with that, or we've not always been encouraged to do that. So I would love to pick your brains on some of this stuff, given your expertise and also your own lived experience, right? In terms of starting and running your own business, putting yourself out there into the world through your book. What are some of when we talk personal brand, what are some of the common challenges you see in this space and ways around those?
Yeah, okay. I love this question. It's such a good place to start because identifying what people struggle with is often the key to unlocking what sometimes subtle changes need to be made to alleviate that. So the biggest challenge people generally have is not knowing what to talk about is one. And that comes, and we'll dive into that as well. Not feeling and this kind of sits in between the next one, which is really having the confidence, but not knowing what to say or how to say it or who to say it to, or not wanting to be braggy or tooting their own horn. Is another one that comes up very often. A lot of people are also fearful of adding to the noise. They don't want to be just putting out stuff, and that doesn't really reflect the level of professionalism or expertise that they have, because at the end of the day, it's reputation. So, and they also want to feel authentic. And so a lot of the tools these days, and there's a lot to be said for using good tools, but there's a lot of tools that can amplify the quantity of stuff, but misses out on a lot of the authenticity behind that. And so I think if you boil all of those down to the 2 biggest things, it's really about how do you get clear on what you want to be known for, and how do you present that confidently in a way that's attracting the right people to your message, getting through to them so that there is actually a connection. And, if and when we go into that part of the conversation, I think it'll be really exciting to explore the dynamics of, it's not just about facts and insights and information. It's about a personal brand is about evoking emotion in people, and how do people feel about you, and how do people feel about what you do and your message. And so that starts with having the clarity and confidence, and then ultimately that can lead to that connection. So a lot of people do, and I'll just throw this in on the side because it's a nice like C to round out 4 C's. A lot of people struggle with consistency, in the sense that they feel like, I should be doing it more. They can do it for a few weeks and then they drop off. And yes, I would agree with that, but usually that's symptomatic of another problem, which is they're not sure what to say, and they don't feel passionately about what they're saying. Maybe they don't feel in integrity or in alignment or in authentic about it. And so that's probably the one that's the easiest to address out of all of them, but it's definitely where a lot of people think they've got a problem. But usually it's probably more at the clarity and the confidence levels if we go beyond the surface and to the core of it.
Yeah, I love that step between clarity, confidence, and connection. that you articulated there. And I think you're so right that it starts with clarity. I think a lot of the reason we're not confident in delivering our messages of who we are and what we stand for is because we don't know what they are. How
Mhm.
do we get clear on exactly who we are and what we stand for? You know, it's easy when we're selling a product to say, this is all the amazing things this product can do for you. But then when we
Mm.
have to say that about ourselves, here's my unique value
Oh,
proposition as a person, that can
yeah.
become really hard. So what's your advice for people that are looking to get clear on what is my personal brand? What is my unique value proposition? And then how do I articulate that?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and one I feel really emotional and passionate about, because it was the very situation that I was in as well. So I ran a marketing agency for 20 years, and I'd also run a lot of high profile public projects where I'd been able to largely hide behind a logo or a brand or a company name. And as a marketing agency, you do great work for clients or for other people. But when it comes to you talking about yourself, there's always this struggle. And that was one of the reasons that I actually moved into this work, after running it. It was at the later stages of the agency, is because I went through this process myself of I could see that the world was changing and people aren't that interested in logos and brands and websites and official spiel, but they are interested in people. And people at their core find it difficult to express and articulate themselves in a way that the majority of people who are not necessarily public figures anyway find it difficult, thinking, well, that's kind of not me. But it's something that's like a future of work necessity in any environment, whether you run a business, whether you're an employee, whether you're someone looking for a job, whether whether you're an activist or a change maker, whatever you want to do in life, you need for people to be able to hear your message and to be able to connect with you as the person sharing it. So all of that to say, I went through this myself, and I understood that at the core of it is not like a lack of marketing strategy, because this is someone who had 20 years of marketing strategy. It really was a confidence issue. And the biggest question that comes up for a lot of people, especially in the area where you're dealing with experts, professionals, high achievers, leaders, marketers, I mentor and train a lot of marketers, is they know they're good at what they do. They feel like they're the world's best kept secret. They're really good, but they also don't inherently understand why they're different from other people. And so I realized through going through this myself, and I was that too. I was like, yeah, I'm really good at what I do, but I don't really see how I'm different from other people. And as I went through that process of myself, of really going deep into what makes me different, and not just identifying it, but embracing that and actually starting to love that part of myself, that was a game changer for me. And then I saw that, and then I took other people through that process. And then when I saw the impact that that had on not just their brand and their marketing, but on them personally, I realized, whoa, this whole personal branding thing, yes, it's a necessity that we need to do, but it's really an opportunity to understand more about who we are. And that comes first before what we put out there. Because if we try to craft something and put a message out there that's just, polished and professional, and it's not to say you can't be polished and professional, but it's like you need to connect with yourself and understand who you are, why you're different, why that matters, and truly embrace that in order to intuitively and subconsciously be able to express that. And so I developed a process which I talk about in my book, Marketing Me, which is really about when it comes to a personal brand, there's two questions that really are at the core of the entire personal branding and positioning equation, which is, who am I to myself? and who am I to the world. And those two, it's not to say the answers are the same, and it's not to say the answers are different. It's very paradoxical, because in the answer to those questions is the intersection point for where your authentic personal brand is going to be. But we can't start with the second question about who we are to the world until we really understand who we are to ourselves. And the first step, and I know this has been a really long answer to the question, but it's not like I really wanted to take your audience through this process to understand that it's such an overlooked but simple key is when we start with our difference and uniqueness and unpacking what actually at our core makes us different and unique, and then being open to think about how is that uniqueness and difference expressed in different ways through our professional life, through our personal life, through the different things of who we are, because there's this, and so that as we show up, there's this congruence there, because this is what people are hungering for. When we talk about authentic, what sits behind that is congruence. People want stuff, and this is not something you can manufacture. It's just there, or it isn't. And so, just really embracing that is a beautiful place to start. And that's where I always tell people, like when people come to me and they want to do my marketing me stuff and they want to build a brand, I'm like, yep. And we'll do that. But honestly, we spend probably 60% of the time at the front end getting really, really clear and dialed in on that part. And the beauty of that is that then it helps you realize how beautiful and unique you are in the world. And then your personal branding efforts, as they ramp up gradually, get to become a celebration of that and an expression of that. And it becomes so much less burdensome and obligatory, because you are just being who you are and doing what you do in a way that people relate to. So that's what I would say to that, Jess.
Yeah. Oh, such good wisdom in there. And I think you really unpicked really well the clarity aspect of this, because you touched on the authenticity and the congruence piece. And I think unless we're clear on that stuff, what we put out and how we present doesn't always appear authentic and congruent, because we're not quite sure what that should look like, or we're being guided by, particularly I see this a lot in our organizations, we're being guided by this is how it should look, or this is what other people are doing. And I think sometimes that can take us away. I particularly see this for women a lot in the leadership space. We are not always aware of our point of difference. And sometimes we carry a little bit of shame around our uniqueness, because we've spent our whole life trying to fit in and change something about ourselves or be like everybody else. And so to actually sit there and go, what makes me different? What is my uniqueness? How do I celebrate that? And who am I to the world? I think is an awesome place to start. Fabulous advice. If we get to that point, right, where we're getting some clarity on this, the next step then is confidence piece. And I reckon this is such a big sticking point. And I know for me and potentially your experience as well, when you put yourself out in the world, and you're under a spotlight and you're having to talk about what you do and who you are, and almost try and sort of sell yourself, if you like, it can be really hard, particularly in some of our cultures. I know you're in Australia, but you're hugely familiar with the New Zealand culture, and here in Aotearoa, I think it's even more of a thing. You touched on bragging and the noise, and sometimes we're having to sell ourselves and having the confidence to articulate our personal brand and talk about the impact we make can be so hard, particularly for women, when we've been taught often to play small, to not brag about ourselves, to not talk ourselves up or sell ourselves. It can feel really difficult. What is your advice in that space for people that might be clear on what their personal brand is, but struggle in that space of confidence? Because I think it's something that touches on so many of us, regardless of gender.
Oh, absolutely. It's so true. So confidence really, it's obviously related to everything. And what I've found in taking people through this process is that the very going through that process of understanding who you are, why you're unique, why that matters, and then being able to articulate that clearly and elegantly in a way that feels good to you, in that you know that it's being in service to other people and helping them as well, has such an impact in you desiring to share that message. And so when you really internalize and believe that what you have to say is of value, that actually, you know, brings up so much more like passion around what you do, and that just comes through inherently. Like, confidence isn't that thing that you're trying to muster up. There's a beautiful example, and I'm just going to refer to it here in my book. A beautiful example of one of my kids, actually, that it was such a profound expression. Do you mind if I read you this little story?
Please do. Please do.
Okay. It's about this is about building belief in you. And it said, a powerful revelation came through a conversation with my 8-year-old son last summer when we were away camping at a favorite spot. One of the regular camp activities we do is Leap of Faith, which involves climbing up to a platform that sits atop a 10-meter high pole with a harness, helmet, and rope attached. The other end of the rope is held by a professional instructor. And as the climber leaps off the platform, the tension of the rope and speed of descent is controlled by the instructor, who gently lowers them to the ground. We'd done that activity in the morning, and in the afternoon made our way down to the river for a spot of canoeing and swimming. My daughter spotted a footbridge that spanned the river where some teenagers were jumping off into the water, and she wanted to try it. My son, not quite the confident swimmer my daughter is, made an insightful comment. Walking along, observing the bridge, he said, "It's kind of like a leap of faith, but with water underneath." So basically, it's a leap of confidence, because confidence is having faith in yourself. With the leap of faith, my 8-year-old continued, you have the courage to jump because you trust in the rope and the person pulling you down. But with the leap of confidence, you have the courage to jump into deep water because you trust in your ability to swim in deep water. And so that story had such a profound impact on me, because the whole thing of confidence, it showed that to me, it was a highlight. It's not about, you know, an activity or a pose or a posture or all of the things that we try and do. It truly starts with this belief in yourself. And when you're a brand and you know instinctively, intuitively, deeply, and intrinsically that you are there delivering value to the world, that is the foundation of having that confidence. And then obviously surrounding yourself with people who can reflect that back as a mirror to help you see that, and who encourage you, and focusing on that, and, you know, being not shy to put yourself out there. Obviously it does take practice, and there's that whole thing of like, you need to use your voice to find your voice, and you also need to find your voice to use your voice. It's a paradox that goes on. But honestly, when you truly know and start to see that you have that capability and confidence and truly believe it, that is just a massive complement to that clarity piece around the personal brand.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. I feel like your 8-year-old is also going to be writing books soon, based on that wisdom and insight. When we've got and some people are further along on this journey than others in terms of, you know, being able to articulate their brand and know the importance of it. And I'm thinking directly for the audience on this show, what are some of the things you can talk to around people that may be on the early stages of this journey? So I'm thinking of, you know, why even is personal brand important? Because so often it's easier for us to put the brand of our business or our organization or our team in front, and then, like you say, hide behind that. Why is personal brand important for, say, if it was someone in a large corporate? Why should leaders care about their personal brand, and why should they invest the time in this work, particularly when it can get a bit prickly and difficult, around the clarity
Yes.
piece and the confidence piece?
Yes. Oh, such a great question, Jess. I love this. And I'm going to give you a few really compelling reasons. Okay. So, first of all, your personal brand is portable. And so you're with this organization now, but in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you may be elsewhere. You may be doing something for yourself. You may be doing something for another organization. So the brand you're under will change, but your personal brand will remain, and it's portable. And the way I like to explain it to people in corporate is you have a personal brand. It's about you. You choose to lend that brand equity to another organization to use, or you will use that in service of the role that you have at the moment. And it will help you to, when it's done smartly, strategically, and authentically, it will help you to achieve those KPIs, or to be a more impactful, influential leader, or attract partners, or aid in commercial conversations, or win the respect of your team, or be a beacon for the organization people want to work with, or whatever the ultimate objective is. You are lending your personal brand to that organization. Your personal brand will exist after the tenure of that organization. And so when you are building your personal brand, it becomes, within that context, it becomes a win-win, because they get to benefit from, your employer gets to benefit from your brand, and they're going to have their work showcased in front of other people and have more impact than they would if it was on their company, just letterhead or things like that, when you talk about the work you're doing. But at the same time, you can use that as a platform to build your own personal brand equity, which is how people, we didn't really even talk about what's the definition of personal brand, but really it's at the core of it, is how people feel about you. What emotion do they feel when you come to mind? And then beyond that, really is around what you are known for, which technically it's more in the personal positioning space, but the two really go together in terms of how people feel about you and what you're known for. And so that's two things. And then the third thing is that, in an era when, well, actually there's kind of four, but then in an era where like there's so much reliance and dependence on technology, and like everyone's trying to be heard, your ability to stand out and be unique and different is what will set you apart for future opportunities. And so when you are looking at the next opportunity and you want to be considered by people, I always say to people, be actively building your personal brand at least 6 months before you need to, because when you want to leave a job and start something new isn't the time to start, because what you want to do is start building your personal brand. It doesn't mean that you want to be doing something new or different, but just putting out there the impact of the work you do, sharing about things that matter to you, and things that align with your values and your professional expertise, means that when you are wanting to have conversations with people, they will pick up the phone, they will respond, because there is a level of connection that otherwise wasn't there before. And so this is a skill of the future for people who are in and also the fourth thing is that it will help you to rapidly build influence within your organization. So there's it's unfortunate but true, is to build influence inside your organization, go outside, because when you got people talking about your impact and your influence to other stakeholders, managers, leaders, C-suite in your organization, it gets you on their radar quicker because you are visible. And so it aids in getting promoted quicker, having more responsibility, getting better deals, having, the relationship with your team, and all of those all mixed up. So that's 4 really, really good reasons to build your personal brand when you're in a corporate environment.
Yeah, and I totally agree. particularly around the future proofing stuff, right? You build your personal brand now for your future. And I love what you've taken us through today, the clarity, the confidence, the connection. It's how we build connection. It's how we influence and have an impact. And going back to some of the earlier stuff you said, knowing who we are, I mean, is key to this. And I think for me, I found that to be true when I put myself out there in the world as an author and a speaker, actually doing that from a place of this is my gift to the world and the impact I want to make and the change I want to create. Just take some of that ego out of it, because then it doesn't become about me. It becomes about the difference we're making and the why, the reason we're doing this. But to do that, of course, we have to know who we are and what makes us tick. And loved that you touched on point of difference as well, because that's so important and something that we often shy away from, and yet is, like you say, our uniqueness. So much wisdom and tips in there. I hope that those listening have had the opportunity to take notes or can go back and re-listen to some of that stuff. Nina, what are you up to at the moment, and where can people find out more about you and your fabulous work that you do, your book, Marketing Me?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So the book can be found on Amazon or where good books are, etc. And my website is a great place to head over. I have lots of blogs, lots of resources. I publish an annual insights report around how, marketers and consumers are changing in the way they engage with people and brands. So it's really information rich. So there's lots of goodies and resources there that people can make the most of. And it's a great first port of call to contact me and learn about the different, workshops and events and, things that I do.
Fabulous. And we will pop that link in the show notes. So we'll pop the links to your website and your social channels in the show notes so that people can find you, find out more about you, grab a copy of Marketing Me. Nina, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you today. And thank you so much for sharing your top tips and your wisdom with us.
You're most welcome. It was a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks so much, Jess.